Good evening. I'd like to take this time to welcome everyone to our special call meeting for May the 31st, 2022. We will then transition to our agenda setting meeting for the June 7th meeting. I want to welcome those that are online and those in attendance that are joining us today. Madam Clerk, you will please call the roll.
Director Miller.
Here.
Director Richardson.
Here.
Director Webb. Here. Director Peck.
Here.
Director Wright.
Here.
Director Wyrick.
Present.
Director Compuris. Director Phillips.
Present.
Director Adcock.
Present.
Vice Mayor Hines.
Present.
Mayor Scott.
Present. We'll now have an invocation from City Director, Vice Mayor Lance Hines.
Please bow your heads. Dear Lord, we come to you today to seek your guidance as we do the people's business of Little Rock. We always look for your guidance and your hand. We also send out our prayers and thoughts to the communities impacted by violent crime over the weekend and the last week. It's happening all over our country, and we seek your divine guidance in helping us. In your son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. May we all please stand for a pledge of allegiance.
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For our special call agenda meeting, we have two resolutions to be considered. Resolution number one is of the intent as the expenditure of proceeds from the capital improvement bond issues for streets and drainage sent to the electorate for approval of levy in Little Rock, Arkansas. City Director Phillips, do you have any comments?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. This resolution is related to, as the mayor mentioned, the capital improvement bonds that we as a board voted on a few weeks ago. At the past, 6, 7 meetings, I've asked, how do we plan to distribute the money among the wards? At our last meeting, as promised, I got with the city attorney's office, and he was able to draft a resolution that I think reflects what I propose that we should do as a body with some guidance from the city manager. So this is handed out to each of us today. And as you read it, you'll notice that there's 10%. This only relates to street and drainage funds, not all the other categories of the bond. But there's 10% that will be set aside in a reserve for events or needs that we're not aware of yet. And then the remaining amount of money will be divided among 10 as opposed to 7 in just awards, but among 10 as it relates to all of the board of directors. So that's the purpose of the resolution, to make sure that each board member has involvement in the distributions of the bond proceeds, assuming our citizens pass it in August. So Mayor, that's the purpose, and that's the resolution that I sponsored. I want to thank City Manager for his guidance and the City Attorney for drafting the resolution on short order, and hope for a good vote from my colleagues. Thank you, Mayor.
City Director Doris Wright.
I think I had misread something. I thought I had said that, I thought this was saying that you, the mayor, would allocate the 10%, but that's not what it says.
No, ma'am.
Excuse me, I got to replace my glasses. That's why I have to keep taking them off.
I understand. I had to get mine situated today, too. So.
Yeah, I got to go do it.
Vice Mayor Hines.
Thank you. I think the two issues that I have being a ward director is a dilution of amount of money to be spent in each ward. This dilutes the pool that goes to the geographic wards by about 30% with no assurances that money would come back. The other issue I have is that it designates that the city director for each ward will determine where these expenditures are going to be spent. And I don't think that I would take it upon myself to decide for my constituents where that money is going to be spent. I think that's why we're going out for public hearings. And so I have problems with both those issues.
Thank you so much, Vice Mayor Hines. Director Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to respond to Vice Mayor Hines. I'll go in reverse order. As it relates to the second concern, I can share that and I understand that. We all have an obligation to be representatives of our constituents. So I think having these public meetings, us talking to our constituents the way we normally do, allow each of us to be informed, along with working with city staff, on what needs should happen throughout the city. I think it is our obligation to cast a vote on how the money will be allocated. So I do get what you're saying in principle, but I guess technically it will be us designating how the money is spent because we are the ones who actually cast votes on spending of city proceeds. And then secondly, as it relates to the first item, I understand the argument about the dilution of award funds, but as at-large director, I can't speak for Director Compuris or Director Adcock, but it's not like the funds that we will be involved with will go outside of the city. We represent all the wards. So the allocations or the recommendations that we make about spending the bond proceeds will go into someone's ward. It's not like a special at-large district that we get to govern over. So I understand the idea that this is dilution, but it's really not, because no matter what the three of us decide, if this passes today, that money still will be spent within the wards. And I had one constituent reach out to me, Vice Mayor Hines, who said, I may live in Ward 5, but I work in Ward 2. So to them, that's one of the reasons why we have at-large directors, so now that Director Compuris, Director Adcock, and myself can look at the bigger picture as opposed to just our individual wards. So no matter how the money is allocated among the three of us, it still will go into someone's ward, so it won't be diluted in that sense. And that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Director Wyrick, then we'll go back to, Director Richardson, then Director Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Vice Mayor Hines. It dilutes the amount of money that's going to the wards. And secondly, we've never had an issue in coming together to serve the citizens in regards to the locations that we've given money to for drainage or for streets. So I'm not supportive of this, and I appreciate your effort in trying to do something with this, but you still have an opportunity to participate when these projects come forward. And I would think that if there's something that you know about, that you would talk to the ward director and come up with some sort of a situation where you're in agreement. Thank you.
Director Richardson.
Yes, Mayor, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Let me first apologize for not being there. I had everything on being there in person. I had a flat. Just finally got back home. I would conceptually, I'm supportive of Director Phillips' recommendation, but it's hard for me to look at voting yay for anything I don't have. I don't have a resolution in front of me, so I don't have the specificity that you guys have. And I plan on voting present on this. Not that I have anything against the constructive framework. I don't have the specificity that you guys have in front of you guys. I'm supportive of the constructive framework. I agree with Director Ryrick. In the past, we've been able to figure out ways to adjust and to deal with items like this. And I thank Director Phillips for his new thoughts and his new visioning and his way of looking at things from an at-large perspective, and I'm respectful of that. But my present vote has nothing to do with the conceptual framework. It has more to do with Director Phillips. I don't have a resolution in front of me I don't have anything to look at, so I don't have the specificity that you guys are privy to. That's what my present vote will be based on.
Yes, sir. Director Wright, then Vice Mayor Hines.
Mr. Moore, in the past, when we set aside money for citywide projects, was it 10%?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and staff made the recommendations, right?
Correct, but the board had to approve it.
Yeah, well, of course, we approve everything conceptually, but, so this would allow the at-large to make those decisions.
I think the best way to describe it, the first part of the concept is the same as we did in 2012, 10% citywide. And then we took the balance of that and divided it by 7. So each ward had, when we went out to the ward meetings, we said, okay, each ward has X million dollars. I think it was close to $19 million per ward when you took in the tax and the bond issue. What this would do, instead of dividing it by 7, it would divide it by 10. And so with the $80 million that was approved, you take 10% off of that, so then you got to $70 million. And what we did in the past would be divide that $70 million by 7. This pass, we'd be dividing $70 million by 10.
Okay, I wanted our viewing audience to understand what was taking place, because even though we discussed it last time, that needed to be stated clearly, what we're trying, what's being proposed here. So that was my only comment, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
I do want to say thank you for the 2 meetings that I saw today that have been scheduled in West Central Little Rock. So one at Northwest Precinct and one at West Central. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Hines?
And structurally, as I'm reading Section 1, subparagraph B, after the citywide set-aside set forth in subsection A, each member of the board except the mayor shall be able to designate how 10% of the remainder of proceeds shall be spent. This doesn't specify it to even our own ward. So I guess if some of us wanted to spend some money outside of our wards, which I don't think would be wise, that I guess we could designate it. That's where I've got an issue with the language. It's pretty general, and I just don't agree with the division by 10. I think division by 7 gets us more impact in all of our wards. So I won't be supporting this. I'll call a question, Mayor.
Second.
Question's been called.
I think my name's on there.
It is, but due to parliamentary procedure, I had to take the immediate.
We haven't read it yet.
It's a resolution.
You have to read it once.
We have to read
Ready,
it once,
yeah.
Mayor. I'll withdraw my motion.
And I apologize because I thought when I read it, but the Madam Clerk has to read it. So. Yes, ma'am. From that being stated, we'll go correctly in order. Director Adcock.
Yes. I appreciate Director Phillips trying to give me money to spend, but I was here in 2011 and before. 2011 worked as well as I've ever seen anything done. I think that this money should be allocated to the ward directors. If we have a thought of something, we can always talk to the ward directors and give them our opinion. But I think that the money needs to be divided 7 ways by the ward directors. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
My hand is raised.
Director Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor. First, in response to Vice Mayor Hines, I can appreciate the revision to subsection B if we wanted to amend that to include that the 10% for each ward member and then 10% for each at-large member to make that more clear. That doesn't change the substance, so I can respect and agree. Let me take my mask off. Agree with that proposal if that's where he was going. Generally speaking, to my colleagues and to the citizens of Little Rock, I think there is an inherent conflict with the way our government is structured if we don't pass this, dividing it by 10. I think what happens, to Director Wyrick's point, she said if someone mentions something to me that's related to Ward 7, I would go to Director Wyrick. We have a good relationship. I would call her and talk to her. But if Director Wyrick decides that my idea, those constituents' idea, doesn't align with her ideas, then neither I nor those constituents are being heard because it's Ward 7. Just like my colleagues up here, I was elected to represent the people of Little Rock, all the people of Little Rock, and I think that as a large member, we should be involved in how the allocations are spent as it relates to improving our city throughout the city. I do not represent a ward. Neither does Director Compeers or Director Adcock. I know she's deferred the money, as she put it, but I don't think that allows me to be a representative of the people who voted for me and all the people I represent to be involved in the process. And that's why I think it should be divided equally. There are 10 of us. We all get to vote. I'm not sure why that doesn't make at least equitable or logical sense. With that being said, Mayor, I would respect the decision to call the question and have the clerk read the resolution and we can get a vote and move forward.
Director Compeers.
In my mind, there are several parts of this discussion that I don't think that I experienced the last time we did this. This money, if it goes to Ward 7, is not BJ's to decide where it goes. It is the board's prerogative to decide where it goes. If you remember last time, what happened is John Honeywell came in with a priority list of things that needed to be done. We talked about those entities, and it was not Doris making a decision or Lance making a decision or BJ making a decision on what happens. It's the community making a decision of their priorities that they want, and then we go over those and prioritize them. The second thing is that being an at-large member adds a fun opportunity because you're not put in the box by the people exactly in your ward. You represent everybody. But it also adds a different obligation, and that is to try to see what's best for the whole city as we make those final decisions. And the one thing that bothers me as I've thought about what Antoine has suggested is that by doing it this way, and I got my hand spanked, Bruce, 10 years ago, when I suggested that we do it not on an equal allocation, and that was not well received at all, is that if we did it where Joan and Antoine and I had our pot, which I don't think there is a pot, I think there's a whole pot, and we look at the 7 wards and make decisions as a body, is that you could create a situation where one ward ended up with more money than the other ward. And I think that makes it very hard to go to the community and say, we're all in this together, because that creates the inequity that I got shot down for before. So I think it's incumbent upon 3 of us to look at this in a holistic fashion. And I think it's incumbent upon us all to understand that this is not Doris's pot of money. It's a pot of money that goes to that ward that the community decides who needs it, where it's needed most. And the last thing I'll leave with you is that we have $1 billion worth of infrastructure need, and all we're doing is putting a little Band-Aid on part of it. So we have to be wise where we put the money. We don't just, it has to be used well and allocated well. So I think that my burden and my other two at-large colleagues is to do what we're supposed to do at large and make sure that it is allocated properly and serves the whole city as we look at each ward. So thank you.
Mayor, if I can be very brief before we read.
Director Phillips.
I just want to, I understand that Director Capers just want to respond about the inequity. Equity is not giving everyone the same thing. That's equality. Equity is meeting needs to get people to the same place. So there may be wards in our city that need more attention than other wards. That's not a problem. We shouldn't be upset about that. If that ward needs more attention, whether it's streets, drainage, or any other issue, and they get more attention than another ward because they need it, that shouldn't be problematic. That shouldn't be problematic for you, me, or anyone in the city. And I get where my colleagues are going with this vote. So I'm ready to call the question, but I just wanted it to be clear what equity is. And if ward fill in the blank needs more work than ward fill in the blank, we should do that and not be concerned about, let's make sure everybody get the same amount of money because it's equal when some areas need more attention than others. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Director Phillips. Madam Clerk, if you would, please read the resolution.
Resolution of intent is expenditure of proceeds from the capital improvement bond issues for streets and drainage sent to the electorate for approval of the levy in Little Rock, Arkansas, ordinance number 22,132 of May the 17th, 2022, and for other purposes.
I heard earlier a question called by Vice Mayor Hines. Is that still available, Vice Mayor Hines?
Yes, I'll move to call the question.
There's a second from City Director Wright. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. The question has been called. We'll now move for the vote. All those in favor of the resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Nays have it. Madam Clerk, if you would read the second resolution.
We didn't have a motion and a second to approve the resolution. We had a motion and a second for the call the question, but not to approve the resolution.
We did. It failed. We didn't? He did it twice.
I called the question, but
We called the question, but we didn't have a motion and a second to
I'm
approve the
sorry.
resolution itself.
I jumped ahead. You're right, Madam Clerk. My apologies. I move for the adoption of the resolution.
There's a motion, second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay.
nay.
Nays have it. Madam Clerk, if you read the second resolution.
A resolution to authorize the city manager to enter into a settlement agreement which includes payment of $85,000 to Aaron Manning to resolve all claims currently in litigation and for the purposes.
Move for the adoption of the resolution.
Second.
There's a motion, second. Before we take the vote, I see a hand from City Director Wyatt.
Mayor, I accidentally voted yes on that resolution. I meant to say no, so I want to change my vote.
Well, we didn't take a roll call, but we'll notate that for the clerk.
Okay, thank you. I thought we were still in the other resolution, so I apologize. Mine's a no vote.
Yes, ma'am. There's a motion, and then I heard a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. Resolution number 2 passes. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
There's a motion, and a second to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. Meeting adjourned. We're now into our May 31st City Board of Directors agenda meeting that will discuss the items for our June 7th agenda meeting. Any questions on items 1 through 14?
Mayor, you have City Beautiful presentation.
That is correct. Sorry about that. City Beautiful Commission Landscape Awards.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the board, City Manager Moore, thank you very much for letting us present the 2021 City Beautiful Commission Awards. It's been a while since we've been in front of the board to do these because we weren't able to have that public presentation. But with that, if we could bring up the presentation slide, I will hand it off to Commissioner Sanders Woods for the presentations. Thank you.
Thank you and good evening. The Commercial Landscape Award. This award was created to recognize new developments that went beyond the city's minimum requirements to develop or improve their new landscapes. Currently, the award recognizes the top 3 best of the best from the year's nomination. This award recognizes any outstanding commercial, institutional, multifamily, or subdivision landscape architectural project within the city of Little Rock. Any development that has been in place for 1 year is eligible. The recipients are presented this evening. Our honorees are Macbeth Library, Nathan Culture. Are you here? Please come forward. Oh, Doubletree, I'm sorry. Okay. All right. We'll try to tell them. Congratulations.
Everyone, if you could turn around, I believe Director Wright wants to get a candid shot of you.
Since McMath is in Ward 6, congrats. Mayor.
Okay, our next honoree is Double B Exxon, located at 2402 Cantrell. Molly Hale, are you here? Great, come up, please. Okay. Can you get a picture of her? Okay, thank you. Our last award goes to Premier Medical Plaza, Roxanne Lynchholt. Are you here? All right. Congratulations. That concludes our presentation for this evening. Thank you.
Mayor.
Director Wright.
I want to say thank you to the City Beautiful Commission. All of these are very well deserved. I want to say to Mr. Coulter, thank you for your diligence in making sure that our pond has the water shooting up at all times. I remember when we sit down and made the decision that we wanted hydroelectric out there. And at that time, Betty Snyder, I don't know if you, I know Joan remembers Betty, and BJ and some of the older head might remember Betty Snyder. Well, we were on the selection committee for the architect and for the design of the building, for even the materials. We had a part in that. They respected the neighborhood association's input because we actually had a lot of input into the selection of the site. So this particular project is very, very important to that community, and I just want to say thank you. It gives me pride every time I drive past it and I see that water shooting up. I tell people, usually when I see a pond with water shooting up, it's a place where I'm not allowed to go in, and it's gated, but this is one that I am allowed to go in. So thank you.
Thank you so much. City Director Richardson.
I'm sorry, Mayor. I didn't take my hand down. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. City Director Wyrick.
Thank you, Mayor. I was looking at the resolutions in regards to lawn care and parks. And resolution number 3, if you read about it, it's lawn care, this lawn care services for mowing and trimming right away, I'm assuming. And it says wards 3, 4, 5, and 6. And in the rest of this, I don't see anything for 1, 2, and 7. So I'm just trying to understand why those 4 wards were picked for this type of work, and we don't see anything for 1, 2, or 7.
Mr. Moore.
Unless I overlooked it, and if I did, I do apologize. No, I'll be calling you if you don't mow my right-of-ways.
Oh, I was prepared for these questions. This year, we have decided to use contractors to help us keep up with right-of-way mowing and free up some of our staff employees so we can address ditch maintenance and other right-of-ways that we maintain. So we did a series of 3 different bids for different areas of the city. The first 2 times we did these, we had 0 bids turned in. This particular one, the second time we did it, we actually got bids. Today, this morning, we opened 2 additional bids that we're going to be accepting, and you'll be seeing those probably in the next couple of weeks, that will address other areas of the city. So we're doing mowing under contracts all across the city. This just happens to be the one phased bid that didn't happen to have Ward 7, or I think 1 and 2 included as well, but they are included in other phases. So you will be seeing those here probably 2 weeks.
We have a lot of right-of-way and open ditches, so we need some help.
That's why we're doing this.
When I saw 7 was missing, I went, okay.
Yeah, no, it's-
And Ken's missing too. Who's missing?
Well, you'll get those lists probably next week of the locations and those other 2 bids that we'll bring in for you to approve.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Director Adcock.
Yes, item 3, 5, 6, and 7 is all about cutting grass. They equal up to over $250,000. I would like to see some justification for going out to outside agencies to do this instead of hiring employees. Why all of a sudden, 3 of them are on parks and 1 with Mr. Honeywell, but why all of a sudden are we going outside instead of hiring employees to do our cutting? And then what happens to our equipment?
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Honeywell, and just for the record, everyone, and Director Adcock, I think you meant over 100,000.
No, it's 289,000.
Right. I think you had shared close to $1 million. I just wanted to.
It was
Yeah.
it's a
You said $250,000. Okay, I didn't hear that. I apologize.
over $250,000.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Honeywell, that looks like that would pay lots of employees' salaries.
And Mr. Couch is here to speak maybe to the parks part of this. We are still going to be using our employees and all the equipment that we have for this type of work. But instead of having weeks and months go by before we can come through and mow a particular part of right-of-way, this is going to allow us to maintain that at a higher rate. The other side of that is if we want to do more of it more often, We're going to have to buy more equipment, buy more vehicles to move that equipment around the city, and also hire more people. We still have a shortage in our labor pool of trying to hire people. It's still an ultra competitive hiring scenario throughout the city. So we still have quite a few openings in the actual positions that do this type of work. So in order to actually try to keep the right-of-ways maintained as much as possible, this is the avenue that we took for this year. That may change in the future, and we may be able to hire more people and be able to do it more internally. But for this year, we felt this is the best direction to go.
Do we know how much these people are paying an hourly wage?
We do not.
Okay. Mayor or Mr. Carpenter, can we ask, because I would hate to think that we're employing people that are paid way below what our city employees are to do our city jobs.
Yes, ma'am. We'll visit with the city attorney and we'll follow up.
Okay.
Director Wright?
That was leading to my question for Mr. Honeywell or maybe Mr. Moore. What does this mean for the right-of-way crew that we have, which is made up of our reentry people? Will this impact them? Will they still have jobs?
It will not. As Mr. Honeywell said, this is just helping us try to keep up. We know we're facing a shortage in our labor pool, and $250,000 would not hire a lot of employees. And as John said, we're having trouble filling the vacancies that we do have now. So in order to be responsive to the board and to the citizens, ultimately, we felt this was the best route to go. Again, this time, now in the parks, we've had contracts. This is just a time to renew those contracts at this point. But as John said, this just gives us the ability to try to keep up. But it does not impact any of our reentry programs, right-of-way teams at all.
Okay, that leads me to my next question. Have we looked at increasing the number of reentry people on the right-of-way or any reentry program? Because it's my understanding that we have quite a few people that are getting out of prison, and they end up here in Little Rock.
So obviously we have those specific teams of right-of-way and sidewalk, but besides that, we don't even ask the question for most jobs in the city. So I can't tell you how many early reentry people we have that's outside of those programs, because on our applications, we banned that box probably 10, 15 years ago.
I recall that, and I recall how the right-of-way crew came and the sidewalk crew, and I remember there was a contract that came up, if Director Wyrick probably recall this too, is how we came up with the right-of-way crew, because it was a contract for an area that we thought was being taken care of privately, but it wasn't. So that's how we got that, and I just didn't want those reentry people to not have that opportunity to get a job and to build a resume. So you're assuring me that this will not impact those jobs?
We're very proud of the work we do in this area.
And we should be.
And we would never do anything to jeopardize that.
Is there opportunity for us to increase the number?
Again, I think we have 12 in right away.
And we have openings within those 12 currently that have not been filled.
Well, I have some outreach to some people that they've reached out to me, and I told them I would check, so it's just opportune that this came up. And because they were looking for jobs for people that had gotten out of prison, so I'll pass that information along.
I would encourage them to please get with our reentry folks in community programs, because we would love to have them apply and come work for us.
Well, it's a program I'm very proud of, because I initially wrote that, and so thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Parks and Recreation, please.
Vice Mayor Hines, did you have a question as well?
On which one?
My question also was on Parks and Recreation.
No, mine's on 14.
All right. Leland?
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and City Board. Yes, ma'am.
Some of my questions is like on number 6, it says the large urban parks. Which parks are those?
Right, so what we did was we break our contracts into 3 different categories. The urban parks are our downtown parks, MacArthur and Riverfront Park, La Harpe Islands, parts of the River Trail. We're trying to bring all the areas that are kind of all in one area in one district. The other one, which is the 30 city parks, those are 30 city parks that were previously picked out. Realistically, most of this was already established the last 3 years. I didn't really change that much of it. We changed 1 or 2 parks here or there. And the first one, number 5, is our facilities. So that's all of like this facility here, Resmond Tennis, all of our community centers, those centers like that.
Why are we not hiring full-time employees instead of contracting this out?
We're currently doing that as well. We just had a maintenance staffing hiring event where we worked on trying to get upwards of 7 new employees, and we're losing employees and we're trying to gain new employees. This is something that rolled down from previous administration, and so it's something that we are using to help us catch up with our shortage of manpower right now as well. It is helpful for us in terms of how much mowing and contracting we need to be doing to accomplish this.
Are these year-round programs or just during the summertime?
This is a yearly contract. It runs weekly from May to November, and then it goes bi-weekly outside of that.
Do we have the same number of employees in Parks and Rec that we had 5 years ago?
I don't have that information in front of me.
I would like to know that, and also how many are in the area that would be mowing and taking care of our parks.
Right. I do know that we do have a shortage in our mowing staff. We've lost, as recently when I started to take over the beginning of this year, we lost a few different maintenance staff. We're working to pick those staff back up, but it's a combination of contract and in-house staff is what has been in the past. If we were able to hire more staff and keep staff on and they work through the process, then we could get away from a little bit of the contract maintenance.
I never want us to send a message to our staff that we do not appreciate them, and you can always be replaced by somebody from the outside.
I understand that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Hines?
Yes, I'd like a presentation on 14, on the real-time crime center. And I think I'm imagining we're setting this up so we can go apply for grant funding.
Actually, you'll see some of that before Assistant Chief Helton and Major King come. Want to take time just to recognize the hard work of our command staff that's gotten us to this point. There's been a lot of tours of different agencies, whether it's been in New Orleans, Memphis, Jonesboro, St. Louis, to get us to this point of what we would deem as a phase 1. I know this is one of the few things that, as Chief Humphrey was transitioning out, working in concert with Assistant Chief Helton and Major Miller, Lieutenant Newford, Major King, and a host of others to get us to this phase 1 point. I think it's vitally needed for our real-time crime center to have here in the city of Little Rock. Essentially, it's what we would call eyes on the street, and really make it more interoperable and beef up what we already have as we go forward to be smarter on crime and leverage technology to identify individuals and persons of interest. And so I just want to commend the command staff for getting us to this point. Members of the board, you'll see in a presentation later today from Ms. Emily Cox, the additional funding that we want to propose to you. And so in total, to really get where we want to be is somewhere around $1.3 to $5 million. And so this is phase 1. You'll see a component Phase 2 later on today. Assistant Chief Helton.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of the board, thank you for having me today. For those of y'all who are not kind of familiar with the Real-Time Crime Center concept, basically what it does is it allows us to pull a lot of technology resources that we have currently and that we would like to have in order to increase our ability to process data and critical information in a more timely fashion, and then probably manage that and then push it out to our officers in the field, our detectives in a more real-time fashion, allow us to be able to identify crime patterns or as well as prevent crimes from occurring. We were challenged by Chief Humphrey at the beginning of the year as, I believe it was previously mentioned, violent crime has been a problem not only in the state of Arkansas, but we've seen it across the nation. And we were challenged to come up with ideas and think about ways we can try to solve it and get better at how we try to manage this problem that's occurring in our country. So one of the concepts was the development of Real-Time Crime Center. I had the opportunity to go to New Orleans, view their center, along in Memphis, been to Jonesboro. And it really is, to me, a game changer if we're able to apply this method to what we already existing have. We have somewhat sort of that technology in place now. A lot of it's a little bit outdated, but our deal is we want to pull it into one location to where we have it real time, staffed by personnel, and some of the individuals that we also want to hire some part-time civilian personnel to assist us as well. So I guess, Director Hines, what specifically do you want me to offer out as far as any other information about the center?
No, I've got a pretty good understanding of it. I know that you and I have had some conversations about it in the recent past. I just wanted everybody to kind of be aware this is a pretty unique opportunity. The city of Jonesboro, I think, has kind of been the vanguard for Arkansas with the first city to allocate funds and do it, and make sure that we've got better eyes and ears on the street and can process that data quicker.
Yeah, one thing with the Real-Time Crime Center, a lot of it focuses on violent crime, but where I think it also pays dividends not only for the city, but for our citizens, that we also are able to support other departments as well. And that would be in the sense we had any kind of flooding, fires, any man-made or natural type disasters, we can utilize our technology to better serve our first responders that are going to those scenes and putting that information out there. So it's a huge effort. It's really going to help the city out, help us to push information not only to us, but it could be parks, could be code, could be the fire department, could be MIMS. So it really is a one-stop shop for us to be able to do everything. And I want Major Keene to kind of talk about one of the little success things that we've had so far with what little bit we do have, to talk about that incident that recently happened.
Okay. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Russell King. I'm the division commander for the Special Investigations Division, and we house a lot of the camera operation up there. As we stood up going into the summer for the Asher Detail or the Sunday Fun Day event, SID or Special Investigations Division put in a variation of the Real-Time Crime Center. So we have detectives up there monitoring cameras and assisting officers in the field. I can't remember the date, but we had a series of robberies. We had 3 consecutive robberies. One of our detectives up there was able to utilize information gleaned from detectives on the ground to identify a suspect vehicle, which they did that through analytics in some of the camera systems that we currently have. They were able to identify the vehicle owner, identify the location, send officers to that residence. They made an arrest within an hour of the 3 incidents. So we know, this right here shows us some fruit from that effort and the power of it. And we think that once we formalize this, there's great benefits. Any questions of me? No? Okay.
Director Phillips, then Director Webb, then Director Wright. It's not on there.
Thank you, Mayor. First, to just thank the police and our former chief to getting us to this point where we can have this conversation. So thank you for your work. I also want to applaud you in the capture rate that you currently have. So I'm excited to know that this opportunity may allow us to increase that number or how quick we can get individuals off the street who've committed crimes. But when I was reading through the write-up, I couldn't tell where it actually would be located. So would this actually be in the headquarters or is this a different facility?
Yes, sir. It'll be located over our new headquarters once that's hopefully here in another month or so. Once we get ready to move in, it'll be housed in that facility.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had, Mayor.
And I will be extending an offer. Obviously, it's just an empty space right now. We're in the process of kind of building everything out, but we will be reaching out to the board of directors along with the mayor, city manager to set up a tour. We can go over and kind of look at the space and kind of get eyes on and things like that.
We'd love to do that. Thank you, Chief Hilton. That's all I have, Mayor.
Director Webb, then we'll go to Director Wyatt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to follow up on something that the Vice Mayor said. And first, thank you and everybody who's worked really hard on this. I may have missed this in the write-up, but I think it said this is for $200,000. And then later, we're going to talk about $1 million. And it said the total project is going to be about $1.5 million. And I think it says something, other funds. We're going to get the money from other sources. And so I think the Vice Mayor mentioned something about other grant opportunities. Is that where we're looking to get the other $300,000?
Currently, the initial $200,000 are going to come out of our CEAS funds, currently within the department, and then the other one will, obviously, I think Mr. Mayor and Emily will be talking about the other part of it. But we are definitely working at grants as we hopefully continue to grow the center, looking at other grant opportunities, and we're working with Ms. Jones over at the city to identify potential grant funding.
Thank you, because I don't want us to get started and not have enough money. I want to make sure we fund it adequately to get it going the way it's needed to be. Thank you for doing this.
Yes, ma'am. And just for clarification, City Director Webb, the initial amount is about, it could be anywhere to create, as Vice Mayor Hines shared, it's really the grand scope you may have. There's a particular city, their real-time crime center may only cost them $500,000, but it can go anywhere. What we are looking at is anywhere from $500,000 to $1.5 million. And so it's really just based on the capacity, because it's not just solely the equipment. You also have to have individuals there to staff. And so that's where we're getting from. But as you shared, and as Assistant Chief Hilton shared as well, Ms. Jones, any extra will be made up from a grant standpoint. Director Wyrick, then Director Miller.
Thank you. I was really impressed with your presentation at the Northwest Crime Watch meeting a couple of weeks ago. One of the things that I think was key, and Major King brought it up, you're able to put some stories together, and by the time the officers arrived, you knew a lot of the information before you got there. And I guess you probably did that manually. With this new real-time crime center, you'll be able to pull lots of data together. And so when the police officer arrives at the scene, he'll pretty well have a story put together. And I was really impressed with, how fast you're going to be able to work and implement what you know when you get to the field. One of the things that I'm interested in is what is your startup time? I'm sure you already have some things put together, but when would you be ready to roll this out to individuals? Because I know there's a component where they can go in and look at information on their cell phones or on their computers to look at crime situations that are going on. What is the startup time for that?
We will plan, once the new building opens, we will plan to move in. Hopefully, we'll have some components already in place. We're working with finance, procurement to obtain, electronic equipment, things like that we're going to need in the center. Like I said, we've already got pieces in place. We will formalize and put what we've got already in there. And hopefully, like I said, the video board is a good example you see here that you have sitting behind y'all. We will have something very similar to that set up in that room. So it's a matter of acquiring and get everything set up, AV and contracts and things like that done. So, but we will be ready to go live when the building opens up with some form or fashion, a component with what we have in place. And hopefully that will continue to take off as funding becomes open for us.
One of the things you mentioned was there needs to be more cameras outside in the field. Have you worked out all of the arrangements for that? I know the money's not there, but do you know how you're going to do that?
We have we've had a lot of discussions and continued discussions as far as camera goes. We've identified a couple of cameras that we really like. It's just a matter of going through the process and making sure we're doing everything that has to be done from a legal standpoint.
Okay, and what's your completion time? When do you think you'll be fully ready?
Again,
Director Wyrick, we think it'll probably be somewhere between 30 to 45 days.
yeah, and a lot of that's depending on availability for some electronics. There is a time delay, obviously coming out of COVID, and some of the acquiring of equipment is delayed. So it just.
So the mayor says you're going to be ready in 45 days.
We'll have some variation ready to go.
I'm trying to get you an answer because he's.
No pressure there.
A lot of it depends on you all next week. So.
That is correct, sir.
Thank you.
Well, I'm pretty excited about what might happen with this, what the potential is for the people in the city, and their ability to kind of know what's going on in certain situations. So I appreciate the work that the two of y'all have put into this. I know it's been an interesting job to pull it together, but I know it's been hard.
It's been a challenge, but it's been fun along the way, learning and trying to figure out how we can make it work for the city.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
45 days.
We'll be there.
Director Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. Certainly, I'm very supportive of this initiative, this real-time crime center. I'm just curious about the funding aspect of it, which I'm sure we're going to go over later, as you stated. But I was looking at the seized funds account. Of course, I'm sure the city has different funds I'm not familiar with, and a lot of us aren't familiar with. I'm just curious about this as it relates to how much is in there. Are there any restrictions as to how this the funds in this account can be used? Can you go over that? And if we use 200,000 of it, how much is left?
Yes. So essentially, in this board, we'll see an array, or not an array, a few more items from the seized funds. For instance, this $212,000 is coming out of the seized funds. The seized funds is somewhere around $1 million. We can get you the specific number. We'll get that emailed to you. We have a nice graph that we can show you where we have potential commitments based on the desires of the police department, which our Office of Executive Administration has recently approved, and so you'll see that coming in the form of an ordinance. For instance, this 212 is a part of that, and so it will take from that $1 million to around $800,000. You'll also see in a couple weeks, because there's some bids out right now for one of the things that our department historically has not done for years on years is equip personal rifles, if you want to speak to that, Assistant Chief Helton. And so we'll be getting some additional rifles. This is in addition to their other artillery that they have. And then there's this new, another portion of a gun, and I'll have Assistant Chief Helton go through those details. I'm not going to go through the details of the guns, but essentially that's somewhere about $90,000. We got something else about another $80,000. You'll see those forms. And so essentially, we'll get that document to you so you can have that, Director Miller. But after this is all said and done, I think from these three accounts, it'll take it down somewhere around $500,000 or $600,000. And we received these funds from the federal government based on some seizures that the men and women in the Little Rock Police Department did actually maybe 2 years ago, or at least it came in shortly after I got in office when we received it in our account, but somewhere around $1 million.
Oh, okay. So that.
But I'll get you a thorough detail, and I'll make sure you have that.
Oh, okay. I was just curious. It's a special fund unheard of, but it was.
And it's not taxpayer funds.
Right. It's seized funds. I kind of get that concept, but I didn't know if that was funds floating around there for years. If it'd been in there.
No, it gets easily spent, and the department are ready to spend it. So.
And so there are restrictions as to how that money is spent. It has to be spent for a specific purpose.
Has to be spent for a specific purpose within the Little Rock Police Department.
Okay.
It can't be spent for anything else but within the police department.
Okay.
And Chief Helton he'll get me the document, and I'll get it to you.
I'll send him an email.
All right, thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
All right, yes. Thank you, Director Miller. Again, thank you all so much. We'll see you next week, Chief Helton, as it relates to this, and Major King. Again, this is a big deal for our community, a big deal for public safety and being smarter on crime. We've been working for a long time with command staff and Chief Humphrey to get us to this point. I'm excited about it, and I firmly believe we can get it started pretty soon, within the next 30, 45 days with our existing equipment, and then purchasing of additional equipment as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mayor, my hand is up, but it was on another item.
Director Wright, I think we're done with items 1 through 14. Items 15 to 18, is that one of your items?
Mine was on 8.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Everybody else had their hand up before I could.
Yes, ma'am. We can go back to 8.
I just wanted to bring to the board's attention that we are utilizing some of the ARPA funds for a football field, some lighting. I'm not in disagreement with that. I just wanted to bring to the board's attention that I have been requesting ARPA funds to upgrade the fields at West Central and the ball fields, so that when we discuss the second tranche, then perhaps that we can allocate some funds, since the precedent is already here. So that was I wanted to bring that
Yes,
to the
ma'am.
board's attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Director Adcock?
Yes, items 16 and 17. Have we heard anything from the applicant on this? I think this is the third time that we've extended it.
I have not heard anything as of today.
And how many times can we keep putting it on the agenda?
That is a question for the city attorney's office. I do not know that there is a limit of the extensions, but I do not know that you can just continually extend something. There is a due process and a completion, so I would defer to the city attorney's opinion on any time limitations or date limitations.
Is there a time that a applicant's application is viable, or is there a time that we say you have to reapply?
The only time that I know of is when there is a decision by the board on an application, whether, if it is denied, there is a year time frame of they can not apply through the planning commission to the board unless if it's substantially identical, it has to be a year time frame. That is the only time frame that I'm aware of.
Mr. Carpenter, is there a time that you see that we finally quit going next 2 weeks, next 2 weeks, next 2 weeks on this?
Director Adcock, as I understand it, these extensions are being requested by the applicant.
That is correct.
And as long as the applicant is requesting them, then the city is not at any risk for taking an inappropriate action. If the city were to just continue something on for some period of time, the U.S. Supreme Court has said that that's a taking and you'd have to pay for it, but that's not the case here. The applicant's requesting this. In terms of your question as to will it go away, there's nothing that I know of in the zoning code now that would do that. And I'm not quite sure what a reasonable time would be that you'd want to look at for that, but the long and short of it is that it keeps being put off and put off and put off, so that there is really a change in the nature of the area at the time that they decide they want to have an action. If it's incompatible with that, then that is something the board can consider if it decides not to go forward.
I know every 2 weeks that neighborhood that is the closest to it comes down here expecting to have something done. And then when they get down here, we've extended it 2 more weeks. And I just don't think it's fair to the neighborhood to expect them to take part in the discussion and everything, and yet there's never a discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Wyrick?
Mine is on item 18. This is the one that's on Bowman Road, close to 36th Street. And a number of us on the board had a concern about the right-of-way allocation, the street plans, and those kinds of things. I'm just curious to know where we are with that.
Yes, Director Wyrick, we did, Planning and Development and Public Works did meet. Director Honeywell went to his staff and talked about what intersection designs could happen at that. They come back with that if you could bring up that intersection, they believe that per our master street plan, the best intersection design at this location would be an arterial intersection. And that is our standard intersection within the master street plan that the board has approved of what that would look like. And that changes depending upon what development comes in. Now, if the intersection is designed and constructed in its entirety as a public project, we will look to build that intersection and get the right-of-way that is needed for that intersection. Per the boundary street, if somebody comes in and does a corner of that intersection, they are required to do that section adjacent to their right-of-way, the dedication of the right-of-way that is needed, and also the construction of that intersection to that master plan. There is also in the master street plan a exemption for the dedicated right turn lane that may not be needed at that time, but the right-of-way is dedicated for that. So in other words, you wouldn't necessarily put in dual lefts at that time. You may require a lesser width on their half, just so that you're not building it and then striping it out for that. But the 100% every time the right-of-way is required at that intersection. So that is the proposal or not the proposal, that is the conditions that we submitted that comes through the Planning Commission, that they are to dedicate the right-of-way for that intersection. That is the comment and the condition. And they also to construct half of that intersection on their side in that quarter of that.
Okay, so there's like a big curve.
Yes.
And so what's that going to look like in real life? If they build their portion, their quarter of that intersection, and the rest of the road remains the same, what is that going to look like for that development and people coming through there? Because it already is kind of a different path that you go through there.
That is correct, and the visual, when you look at it, I think some of the structural components that everybody sees is, we've talked about the big AT&T box. You know, we had a concern about what they're planning on doing with that. AT&T is planning to relocate that. That is in their infrastructure plan and is part of what they would call a legal mandated project. Mr. Honeywell can speak more for that. There is going to be a little bit, if I remember seeing some of the layouts through there, just conceptual, mind you, of what we're coming off of that curve of we have to realign that. A little of that's going to be, you're going to see also improvements to the east side of the intersection. That is, it's hard to visualize now, but if you think that they're going to be adding also on that east side of the intersection right now, that improvement, grade-wise, that's all up to per AASHTO design guidelines when we come down through there, what that fill will be and how that tie will come in. I saw Mr. Honeywell come in for a little bit. He might be able to add a little bit to that design.
But we have a curve, and then
You do.
here we're going to construct this road to whatever our standard is for the future. So what happens? Are we going to have barriers up there and everybody's still going to go to the left and then they're going to go to the right in front of this property?
Well, definitely during construction, you're going to have some of those so they can actually construct it while we keep the roadways operational. But typically, we do not put necessarily barriers on roadways that are not being used. We'll try to stripe them out until it becomes more of an issue. You've seen that in our widenings before, where they've done the boundary street and they've done their half-street improvements, and then it just dead ends at the property line. We'll put up a barricade with some red diamond signs, and then you'll see a striping, a white line stripe that tapers out typically per MUTCD standards or striping standards, national standards. But it also boils down to how much they're widening, because sometimes even those taper standards, you're not able to do those tapers in the length of the roadway that is actually getting the widening. We may actually have a widening project, and we've done those before. I can't speak for this one because Those plans haven't been produced yet, for that. But if it doesn't meet those striping standards as far as a taper, we will essentially try to just stripe off those lanes, and it would operate with the existing lanes. And we'd only open up those lanes as other widening happens or the intersection improvements occur, remaining intersection improvements.
I don't have a good visual for this because it is such a complicated turn.
It will be when they come down because of that curve as you've drove it before. It has a super elevation at points, and that transition needs to transition back to a somewhat, I wouldn't say level as far as going north-south, because you have a slope that you're not going to be able to get rid of, but it does need to transition into where the intersection is not super elevated so that you can have some transition to go east back on 36th and also south without having to hit a super elevation.
That's a requirement for this particular project.
They have to look and see how that affects the entire intersection when they propose the plans for their section of widening.
Okay. All right.
Director Wright.
I do have a good visual. I was just in that area. And it looks like the C-store is going to have a portion of it abutting 36th Street.
That is correct.
Okay, so that street is very unimproved. So are they going to have to improve 36th Street where their store it's on the boundary?
Yes, it is. They'll have to do it for the boundary of their property.
Okay.
Whatever is adjacent to 36, they have to provide that boundary street improvements per that intersection design that y'all have up there, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to stripe it out to look exactly like that intersection. There would be no need to put in dual lefts at this point in time, and probably no need to put in a dedicated right at this time. Definitely the through, a single through lane, and possibly the rest of it would be striped out. And I believe we're requiring the right-of-way dedication, but we wouldn't necessarily need to have a dedicated right turn lane from somebody on 36 going back east, wanting to south on Bowman. That small queue length and dedicated right turn lane may not be needed at this time. There's also, I would say, construction and time frame. If somebody is looking to build something further back to the west, and we have a public project we're looking to do, then that widening is possible, but you also don't want to necessarily put in a road widening that doesn't get used for 20 years. Because you also, even though a vehicle may not be on it, there still is wear and tear on road widening from just weather, standard weather, freeze thaw, that you don't want to have a widening out there for 20 years and not be utilized. And so the right-of-way will be there. But we haven't reviewed plans or approved them for any of the construction of that intersection as yet. But I'm just letting you know that I can see where a dedicated right turn lane may not be necessary for that intersection at this time, but the right-of-way width would.
Well, there's no place for a dedicated turn because of the box that's sitting there.
Well, that box is on the northeast intersection. So if you look at that intersection, that would be the upper right corner.
Mm-hmm.
That's approximately where the box is located. They're on the southwest corner.
I understand
that bottom left. So they would not be doing any widening or improvements at that box location. That would not be the requirement.
Okay. So further back, if I'm coming from Shackelford, I'm coming up to this intersection, will they have ingress from 36th Street into the C-store?
Yes, 36, they'd be able to go across the intersection into a portion of 36 that has been widened to accommodate this additional lane so they can come in and turn off of 36 south into this site.
Okay, so will that turn be further back away from where this box is so that there won't be a problem there with that box?
They would not do any improvements as far as 36th Street east of that intersection. So if you're asking, would we require them to do any improvement of that movement coming in for that leg? No, it would only be for a receiving lane from somebody that is on 36 that is going to continue through the intersection going west to the C-store. They would have to build a receiving lane for that movement.
But they're not required to do it with this application?
They're required to do it on their side, on that west side, that southwest corner. They're not required to do it any other corner of that intersection.
Well, the other side,
Yes.
they have apartments there, and I've noted that they're doing a lot of landscaping through there, and they're actually putting sod in that island where the box is. And I didn't know if that was being privately done or whether we were a part of that, but I did note that that was going in there, and that was, I think, maybe last week, okay? But I still think this is gonna be a problem. And I can see this, Director Wyrick, hopefully being a citywide project, because what we're hearing might make sense in engineering talk, but in practicality, this is going to be a problem. I can assure you of that. I travel that way quite frequently, and we have the Rock Creek Church there, we have all those apartments there, and whenever you have a C-store, it is going to draw traffic there.
And it's awkward. It's an awkward situation.
It's very awkward. And
that's the reason why I don't have a visual as to
Yeah.
how this is going to work, because it appears to be very awkward.
I can't
for
see it working.
transportation.
I hope I'm proved wrong, but I'm anticipating that we will have to allocate some funds to fix this.
And please keep in mind also that we do have another avenue of an intersection improvement when somebody has the Boundary Street improvement requirement. They can contribute to just in lieu fees or what their cost would be at the intersection. If we know that there's a public project that is to come online, but right now we do not have one that's approved for this intersection online, the timeline for this use of the funds is within 10 years. And so if I'm correct on the years, I think Mr. Carpenter may correct me if I'm wrong on the years. After that, if we do not do anything at that roadway to spend those funds for that intersection or within an area that would deem what those funds could be used for, then if requested, we have to give it back to the developer, all those in lieu fees, plus any, I think, interest that may be accumulated for where we place them. So that is another avenue. But really, that's just to allow, if improvements are going to go in, and we believe there's going to be some intersection improvements in the future, and there might be opportunity to receive those funds and add them to funds that we're going to allocate in the future to be able to do the intersection as a whole. It really helps in construction and tie-on to not have any accommodation that we have to make to tie on or modify anything that a developer has done at the intersection.
Well, I can also see that only one side, which is where this C-store is going to be built, we would have to widen going that way, because where those apartments are, all of that's already done. So I don't, and it's kind of a hill. So I don't see how you're going to go over that way when all of this starts happening.
I understand. I think probably the best intersection in that location, or pretty close to that location, that kind of gives a little bit of idea of how Boundary Street improvements and widening can occur throughout an intersection, including grades going up a hill, is the intersection pretty close to where I live, right there at Kirby, existing Cooper Orbit, the apartments right there, the gas station's right there. The improvements was required for those apartments, the gas station. So if you look at it, the improvements going north up Kirby Road was done for the Boundary Streets. The intersection right there at that northwest corner was done for the Boundary Street improvements. The other side of the roadway for the apartments was done for it. But if you drive by and just look at what the intersection is right there as Cooper Orbit ties in, that intersection, Cooper Orbit was not done for that. There hasn't been a development that would tie onto the south side done yet. It is tied to another development conditions that come in. But when that one proceeds, their improvement is to eliminate that Cooper Orbit intersection, and then also widening anything that happens on the extension of Cooper Orbit up to Canis, and then do that improvement, and that should make all that tie. So it did happen. It did happen with grades or roads, be it Canis is not as steep It's pretty flat through that area for that intersection, but Kirby Road is steep, and it did happen, the widening.
Done. How long did it take to get
It took a while to get that done.
And all the people that travel through that intersection had to deal with that. And that's what I've got a concern about with this right here.
I understand, but that is the means of what we have at this point in time per our codes and what we can enforce that allows us to get this to be done.
My question would be, is there a better way for us to be doing this type of work? And I mean, I understand, and I'm not against this project. I want to make that clear, because this project is probably the only way we're going to get some improvements to that intersection, because it's a problem now. Okay, so when this happens, I feel like it's going to be more of a problem. But I don't like the fact that we seem to take so long to get anything done, and then there has to be some major outcry before we can get it done. And it just seems like we could modify or improve our planning and public works policies that would address some of this on the front end, instead of stuff taking years and years and years. But I do think that this will probably speed up the process, because I think it's going to be a problem.
Seeing no more questions. Are there any more questions as relates to the remaining items? Let me check again. The agenda meeting is now adjourned. Well, actually, no, we'll go straight into our discussion. Ms. Emily Cox.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the board. I have a PowerPoint presentation, if you could pull that up, Angie.
Mayor, while she's doing that, can I make a comment?
Yes, ma'am.
This is one of the issues I have when it comes to us discussing things. We get a presentation where it appears that decisions have already been made on how to spend the money, but we haven't had a chance to give input. And then when we do give input, nothing changes on the presentation that we've received. And given the fact that we are putting $138,000 into lighting at one field, I would like some of these funds to go toward upgrading the ball fields at West Central, so that we can have a better field of play for the kids. And if that's not included in here, will this be modified to include that? Or is it just going to be me making a request that gets ignored again?
Well, what you'll see from Director Cox is that we've had several meetings, and she's taken into account what you all have shared in these meetings, and that'll be in this presentation. Is that correct, Director Cox?
Yes, sir.
Director Cox, if you'll proceed with the presentation.
Yes, thank you. So you can go to the next slide, Angie. As you know, the American Rescue Plan Act included the state and local fiscal recovery fund, and Little Rock's allocation is $37.6 million. And the first tranche consisted of the first half of that, which we received last May, and the board has now allocated all of those funds in the first tranche. And we were told by U.S. Treasury to expect to receive the second tranche in May, so this month. And we received word today from U.S. Treasury that the deposit of the second tranche of $18.8 million is in process. So we look forward to that hitting the bank in the next couple of days. Next slide, please. And this is just a reminder for you that costs must be obligated by December 31 of 2024, and projects must be completed and paid for by December 31st of 2026. And the next slide shows the eligible expense categories that we have available to us under ARPA. And you've seen all of those before. And then the next slide has some additional information from the final rule, which became effective on April 1 of this year. And it presumes an expanded set of households and communities are impacted or disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. And for us as a city, that generally includes wards 1, 2, 6, and 7, and a portion of Ward 3. And there are other areas that qualify, but that's a general description. And additionally, the final rule includes a large list of enumerated eligible use for these impacted households and communities, including making affordable housing, certain community development, and neighborhood revitalization activities eligible in those communities. And next slide. The next 3 slides, 6, 7, and 8, are all reminders of what the board approved as priorities for the first tranche. And you received a memo on this as well on Friday, so you can glance at those at your leisure. And then now we come to the recommendations. And you may recall that last month, I believe it was April 24, possibly, at an agenda meeting, each of you provided your input on how you wanted to see the second tranche spent. And so we culled through all of those. We took copious notes and tried very hard to incorporate much of that feedback into our recommendations for the second tranche. So with that, we can go to the next slide. And I will say that I put these in order of costs from the most expensive to the least expensive. And I will say that the very first one is not an item that came from the members of the board at that April meeting. And it came to us from the Public Works Department. And I'd like to give you some specifics about that. And John can also answer questions. He's here as well. But the capital improvements that the Public Works Department needs are for both collections and landfill operations. The landfill needs include replacing the sanitary sewer lift station discharge pumps, which have exceeded their lifespan, and the leachate pond liner system has deteriorated over time, and it needs to be replaced to prevent leakage. And then the landfill also needs to develop a new daily cover operation to meet permit requirements. And lastly, for the landfill, they need a new grinder to operate the mulching and composting process to handle the yard waste that our residents put at the curb. And the existing grinder is beyond its intended lifespan and cannot be repaired beyond just very minor issues. And then the purchase of new equipment takes a minimum of a year. So those landfill needs equal $1.7 million. And then the collections division at Public Waste is in need of 2 side loaders that are approximately $300,000 each, and some additional vehicles, 2 pickup trucks for $25,000 each. So altogether, that's $2.35 million that's needed for the Public Works Department that we're recommending here. And then next, you'll see that we recommend $2 million for parks and community centers, and these would need to be located in disproportionately impacted communities. We're also recommending $2 million for a senior center, and these funds would likely be used to revamp a site to be determined, but programming costs would need to be identified outside the scope of these ARPA funds. Next, we recommend $1.5 million for infrastructure needs that would serve a dual purpose of economic development. And then we've talked at length earlier tonight about the Real-Time Crime Center, and here is the $1 million that's in addition to the $200,000 from the previous item. And we also heard the need for affordable housing, so we recommend setting aside $1 million for that. And access to healthy foods and addressing food deserts is broad within the scope of the ARPA funds, but we feel there's a need for that, and we propose setting aside $1 million for that. And then on the next slide, you'll see $500,000 listed for downtown capital needs and a downtown master plan. And this would, our recommendation is to split that with $250,000 being spent for capital needs and the other half for a master plan for downtown. And the Downtown Little Rock Partnership would be expected to raise funds for the remaining cost associated with the master plan. We also anticipate needing additional funds for community violence intervention programs, so we're recommending $500,000 at this time. And lastly, we heard from you about the need for facility improvements for fire stations, and we recommend $500,000 for that. So all of these recommendations total $12.3 million, and that leaves a balance of $6.5 million that would be still unobligated, so in case priorities change and needs come up and between now and the end of the life of the fund. And with that, I'd love to take questions and hear your feedback.
Thank you so much, Director Cox. Director Wright.
Thank you. Mayor, I had asked you previously, and you had said you would check on the cost of the Beth Chisholm Center, what that was available for.
What center?
Beth Chisholm. Did you?
I can't remember I know we've looked into it. I can't remember the exact amount. I'll follow back up.
All right. I know the senior, our commission on, age-friendly commission will be very happy to see this, so we will be getting their input on that. But I want to address,
I do want to set the expectation. I do believe it would be more than $2 million, but not completely certain, but we'll get back with you.
okay, last time I heard it was under that. But on this community violence intervention, I don't know whether you all know this, but over the years that I've been doing sports, I've seen that it does work and to intervene with kids to keep them out of trouble. And I would like to see these fields upgraded at West Central so that we can get back up and going with our sports leagues. Everything has kind of like died, and there's no excuse for that. We need to do more to put programming at these community centers so that they can be utilized after school and not just be vacant. And having one or two people in the gym and things like that. So if there's any way to increase this, I would be supportive of that. And Mr. Moore, I wanted to bring to your attention the project that AT&T was interested in partnering with me on, which was the Outdoor Learning Center, to address the fact that we are a food desert out there, and to see if some of these funds could be utilized for that. I see you mentioned here in the presentation, food desert and access to healthy foods, and that was a part of that project. So I'm bringing that out so that the board will know that this project has been on the table now since 2018, and we've never been able to get it moved forward at all. I'm okay with the affordable housing component, and I don't know if we have any plans for the parks as far as the community centers, but I'd like to see that the field upgrades in there. And just like we specified it, will that be something that the Parks Department would do, or would we make a recommendation to get that done?
I think I'd defer to the city manager to answer that.
You're right. We know that is a priority. Mr. Couch, the new Parks Director, knows it's a priority. And we heard from the board that community center upgrades, which this would fall under, is a priority. So if this passes, the board adopts this, then we'll be able to say, we'll look at each center and determine what the top priority is. And so that's how we want to approach it. And for instance, in the West Central Center, which is the most recent one, there's really not any building needs. So we're gonna look at all the centers and see what their priorities are.
Well, because there are no building needs, the ball fields still have rusty tin.
No, that's what I'm saying. I mean, that would fall under Parks and Community Center.
Okay. I want it out in the public. I don't want me to keep asking to you and to whoever, and then all these years later, nothing has happened. We still have rusty tin on the top of the dugouts. So the only way to move it forward that I see is to make the public aware, because a lot of people are not aware of this. Because if you've never been out there and seen it, you don't know. But that's an embarrassment. We're the capital city in the state. And that's what we're putting our kids out there on. So I just want to make sure that I'm going to keep bringing it up until we get it addressed. So thank you.
Director Webb.
I'll defer.
2.
No, I took my hand down. Thank you.
Director Peck.
Thank you. Look, I see the expenditure for the LRFD facility improvements, but I'm still concerned about fire apparatus. I know we're moving in the right direction, but a firefighter friend of mine sent me something just about an hour ago about the fact that he's riding around in a 32-year-old fire engine. We know that's well beyond the life of a fire engine. And a picture of looks like some sort of SUV that engine 20 was on this morning, not a fire truck. And I think this is really, really critical if our firefighters do not have the apparatus they need to keep us safe. And I know we've addressed this, but I don't think we've addressed it sufficiently. I don't know if Chief Hubbard is here, but y'all, we need to pay attention to this, I think.
And Director Peck, I don't know if Chief Hubbard is here, but through the actions of the board from the first tranche and other actions that have been taken, we have the funds available. Due to supply and demand, we're waiting on the apparatus to be procured, secured from that standpoint. So we have the funds available, close to somewhere around $18 million, somewhere around there altogether with all funds. So it's prioritized, but also we are at the will of the manufacturers.
And I do understand that, but I would like a presentation next week from Chief Hubbard or someone about what their needs truly are and where we are in fulfilling those needs.
Sure, we'll make sure you have that.
Thank you.
Director Adcock.
Yes. Emily, was there any reason we wanted to keep $6 million and not allocate it?
We had talked about the priorities and needs just change over time, and this fund, we don't have to obligate everything until the end of 2024, and we have until the end of 2026 to spend it, and it just seemed wise to hold some in reserve. And that's what we hear from the federal government as well.
That may be a wise decision, but when I look at the East Little Rock Community Center, and I remember the night when we developed this, I asked that we look at what can we do. I think that Director Miller will agree with me to get that open. We have a community center in a neighborhood that has one employee and they do not have any programs. So, why not tear the building down? So I don't see anything in here. You've clumped all the community centers together. And I would like to have someone answer me a question. Have we ever looked at the cost to redo the ball fields at West Central? I mean, we've talked about it and talked about it. We've never had a cost of how much it would cost to have them done. And so tonight we're talking again about the ball fields at West Central. We have no idea, but we do know that we're going to save $6.5 million. At one point, West Central had 1,000 kids playing out there. I understand that we this year asked for the kids to come and sign up. I'm not a sports person. And we had less than 100. Now that's 900 young people that are not playing ball this year, but we can sit here and say we want to save $6.5 million. I would like to see that $500,000 to be moved up to the Parks and Recreation for the specific need of the West Central ball fields so that we can have those children back out there playing. In Southwest Little Rock, we have a ball field that has been empty now for about 15, 20 years. And we need to do something. We talk about these young people, but we don't invest a little money sometimes to do a big job. So I would like to see the $2 million on Parks and Rec to have at least a $500,000 added to the ball fields, and then also to look at East Little Rock. At Southwest, I understand the kids can't play basketball because the floor has so many waves in it, whatever that means. And I'd like to see us, be specific, not just $2 million for Parks and Rec. Let's get specific with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Campiris.
Well, just as a satellite, Doris, Gary Smith and I were out there 3 weeks ago to look at the ball fields, and Jordan Johnson's going to bring the people from junior deputy down there and give us an honest appraisal about what it costs. So, and to try to help Doris get that done privately. Emily, how much money, if we pass this, are we going to spend so far?
I'm sorry, would you repeat the question?
If you take the first allocation and then what you're proposing, right, what's the total amount?
31 million approximately.
Well, I will tell you, Doris is a great advocate for her parks, and when I made my proposal about the community centers, we need to do that. But to me, it is reprehensible that we're going to spend $31 million on various projects, and we think our downtown deserves $500,000, and then you're going to say to people, go raise the rest of the money to do a study. And you have the River Market that's the center of downtown that qualifies for every bit of this money, and there's not a penny in here for it. And everybody cares about their areas, but that to me says the administration and this board don't care about downtown. And if we don't care about downtown, let's close it down, and then we'll really find out how to suck money out of the city, because it'll go to hell in a handbasket. And it just, to me, this is a slap in the face that we're going to spend $31 million, and then you say, we're going to spend a little money on a study, but you've got to raise the rest of it. And that, to me, I'm not going to vote for this. If that's what we think that our city is made of, and in $31 million, we can't figure out how to take care of downtown, why be here? Why be in the city? Why does Antoine want to have people downtown? Why does Virgil want to take care of things downtown? And it's a slap in the face to all the people who are doing that. And I can be rougher than that, as you know. But to me, that is just nuts. So.
Director Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor. Got a few things I wanted to address. I share Director Wright's and Director Adcock's advocacy for how we spend money in the community centers, but Director Cox, if I understand this correctly, we hadn't allocated how we're going to spend that $2 million, correct?
That is correct.
So in theory, the ball fields that Director Wright has been so adamant about, we could allocate some of that $2 million for that, correct?
Correct.
In the East End Community Center, correct?
Correct.
So I get that, and I understand at a later date we'll determine about the specific items, and I'll say it publicly and support Director Wright in making sure we make those improvements out at West Central. I had a few other questions about the food desert and access to healthy foods, and I know we are just talking big picture categories, and I understand that every dollar that's spent we're going to vote on at a later date. But when y'all were having discussions about that category, what do we have in mind to address food insecurity in certain parts of our city?
We've talked just broadly about the need and just knowing that we have food deserts within the city and it's a real need. So kind of to be determined on future plans, really.
Okay. I understand that, and I don't know, maybe, I trust y'all to do the work, but that is a big deal in our city. We've talked about it here at the board before. So that's one item I would like to see fleshed out with some ideas on how to address that. I know there's certain parts of our community that don't have a grocery store. I know we had a conversation at this board about Dollar General and them trying to expand their offerings in some of their stores. Maybe we reach out to them or other cities, whatever, but I think that's a big deal. So the sooner we can flesh out different type of ideas related to that, I would appreciate, and I bet our citizens would appreciate it as well. As it relates to downtown, the capital needs and master plan, and I guess I'll direct this to the mayor or the city manager. I know a couple weeks ago we were talking about how much surface parking we have in the city and the idea to increase density downtown. And I know I threw out the idea of something like downtown density plan. Can this be a part of that? Can I tag along?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's a simple answer. Thank you, Mayor. And then lastly, and this may be a question for Director Collins if he's still here. If we're talking about the capital needs and the master plan, I know there's a lot of buildings downtown where the occupancy for office space is lower than it used to be, including the building that I work in. I know developers are thinking of creative ways to use that space. So can we be flexible with our zoning on the front end to attract developers to reuse some of that space differently than just office space? Is that something we can do, or I don't even know how that works?
We're working on, through our Capital Avenue Revitalization Committee, working through that right now, and assuming the board passes this will also give the opportunity to flesh that out.
Okay. Okay, that'll work. Thank you for that. And I think, Mayor, that's all I had.
All right, we'll now go, let me just stay in order, Director Wright.
Yeah.
I'll come back.
I wanted to make sure you saw I did put my hand back up.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We'll make sure. Director Peck, is your hand still up?
It's up again.
All right.
Is it my turn?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, thank you. One other thing I wanted to address, and I know we did a lot of this with the first tranche, and this is in Ward 4. But if any of y'all have not been to Pankey, I invite you to go to the Pankey neighborhood. I live about a third of a mile away from it. We have a community center there. There's some major problems. There's a bridge. I know Joan's been there because you've been with me, and I've been there with City Manager Moore. South of Highway 10 or Cantrell, there's some major problems. There was a bridge that went out, 10 or 12 years ago, and it's just a run-bowl of concrete that's left there. We haven't even cleared it out. I'm sure this is not RDOT because it's back off of Cantrell, and maybe Director Honeywell could address this. We have got to do something in Pankey Wall. It is just, it's just astonishing, the condition of some of those roads and streets. We've addressed some of the drainage. We've done some work in the park. The communities coming together and adopting Pankey Park to make it more presentable. There are a lot of code violations. We've addressed many of those, but some streets and just the removal of that bridge would go a long way in giving that neighborhood some pride back. They've really been left behind, and I wish everybody would drive out there and take a look at it. I know that our Chief of Staff, Kendra Pruitt, when we had a Scott stroll out there, she said, I grew up in Newport. I'm kind of used to seeing places in small communities like this, but I can't believe it's Little Rock. Well, I can't believe it's Little Rock either. So I would like us to look at Pankey. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Director Capierce, is your hand still up? Is your hand still up, Director Capierce? All right. Director Miller?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a general observation, certainly about downtown, which is obviously Ward 1, that has so many varied needs from our financial district, our entertainment district, to neighborhoods that are south of Roosevelt and neighborhoods that are in Midtown. Tremendous amount of interest and certainly I think downtown deserves the attention, certainly that Director Capierce is talking about. One of the things that I get questioned about, and I'm trying to get some answers about, is with the widening of I-30 and all the land that it's creating that's vacant, certainly down in that River Market area. Is there some group or entity that can give a presentation about all that land and what's going to be done with it, and questions about, of course, park decks and everything else? I mean, I need to be brought up to speed, certainly as the Ward 1 director, and I'm certainly, all these board members would like to know what's happening with downtown, certainly as it relates to the widening of I-30, what's going to be done with all that land, if it's going to be given to us, and what are we going to do with it? And so I'd like a presentation or just some idea on that. And then the other thing about food deserts, which we certainly have a number of them in Ward 1, I'm concerned about making sure we don't lose the grocery stores that we have. And so as we think about addressing the needs of these communities that are in food deserts, I certainly don't want to lose sight on the fact that we have some grocery stores and we don't want to lose the ones that we have. And so I want that to certainly be top of the mind awareness too, as we have these discussions about addressing food deserts, because we can quite easily have some more if we're not careful. But again, that land, what are we going to do with it? What are some of the consequences of the widening of I-30 with the land, and what are some of the plans for that? I'd love to get some kind of idea.
So yes, just briefly, and we'll continue on with questions. I'll go in reverse order. As it relates to the existing grocery stores, our Office of Executive Administration have been in constant contact with some particular grocery stores that are currently, which if they did leave, would be in food desert areas, and some would still consider them food desert areas, but they do have some grocery stores there. We've been in constant communication with those grocers. They're committed. At this time, of course, they're companies, they can change their mind at any given point in time, but we've had direct conversations with those grocers, and they're committed. Secondly, as it relates to the $1 million to the food, addressing food deserts, there's an array of different things that both myself, City Director Webb, and Director Capierce, and a host of other people who have been focused on this particular issue. So for those who are thinking, what's this $1 million? It could be to purchase an existing site where there is a food desert, there may be a grocery store there, to figure out what we can do to get it up to shape, to then get it to market to a private grocer. That is permissible within these dollars. There are also some private partners that are willing to work with cities that have tons of food deserts. Cities have to put skin in the game, and this will give us the ability to put skin in the game. One of the things that Director Webb and I have discussed, this board did vote on a resolution to put forth a food desert committee. We wanted to wait to get some teeth and some ability, and not just have people meeting to meet. Having this $1 million gives us something to discuss and work with from a community standpoint, to ensuring that we're doing things with the community, not to the community. So that's on the food desert. As it relates to, and we definitely want to get you included on this food desert committee with Director Webb and myself, that Director Webb will be co-chairing with us. As it relates to downtown, what we will do is we've had both Director Honeywell and leadership from Arkansas Department of Transportation. They've been doing a road show to different community organizations about what's going on downtown. We'll have them here shortly. We'll get that on our next policy agenda. As it relates to specifically to the land, I think everyone's known for quite some time that 15 acres, is it, Bruce? 15 acres of land, which is currently the Arkansas Department of Transportation. They will turn over the maintenance. They'll bring it to us in a green lot. They'll turn over the maintenance to us. It's up to us to figure out what to do past it just being a green lot. There's a lot of conversation out there with Studio Maine. Ultimately, it's going to cost money to make it into, it'll be ours, and what we make into, whether it's a passive park and things of that nature, that's yet to come. We don't get that to 2025, but we need to start that planning now. And so that's all underway. As it relates to the deck park, that's totally separate from this park. The deck park as it relates to 6th Street, Director Compuris. And then this board just passed a resolution to support 50 for the Future, who are putting forward some private dollars there. All that being said, we'll get Director Honeywell and the Arkansas Department of Transportation to do a presentation. Thanks, Mayor. A pleasure. I haven't forgotten. I'm just going in a row. You're next up after Director Webb, Director Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to touch briefly on this food desert question, Director Miller is right, and since the late 1990s, we have seen a steady decrease in the number of grocery stores that we have across our state. And I think it would be good to when we get the task force appointed, if we can put a little bit of the resources into data collection and some other things. The governor has created a statewide task force on this issue right now. And some of the old answers are not working anymore, but we have a lot of information from states and cities across the country on things that do work, but it's a growing problem in our state. One thing I would like to know more about before we vote is, we've talked in the last few weeks, we've put more money into potentially, if the voters approve the bond vote in August, we've put more money into parks in that, but we've also had conversations about the number of parks that we have, and do we have the right number of parks? Do we have, what are we going to do at War Memorial? And before we vote on some of this, these funding numbers, and I also think Director Compuris raised a really good point about downtown. And so I'd like to know more from Director Couch about what some of the overall plans are so we can make a more informed vote on this.
And we'll definitely have that, but for board members, just to, the likelihood of reducing our 63 parts in any shape, form, or fashion in the short term or long term, we just don't see it being feasible with the amount. When we're really thinking about crime prevention, you got to understand where all of our parks are located within particular areas. We do not want them to be vacant unless there is the ability to sell them, and then we know there's going to be development shortly thereafter. From a public safety standpoint, I think that's something we got to take a long, hard look at, and I think begs to the question is having a long-term solution, even understanding what that is. It's not a quick fix. It's easy to say we can reduce 63 to whatever amount, but there are communities where these parks reside. I just think of some of the parks that are located in Ward 6 that we just upped and closed them today, and we don't have a strategy in place what that could do. And I'm just giving some examples, but I do think, that's a long-term. I know that's something that's been discussed by this board for quite some time, but that's a long-term discussion. I think we definitely have to look at, and then also to War Memorial Hyman Park. I think we all know to make the changes that we really want to make to that, that's somewhere between $20 to $50 million. And what's going on in this millage, that doesn't address that. We're working on some outside funding to address some of those issues.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I think you do raise another interesting point, because to go back to food deserts for a second, when we look at some of the grants, there's some $25 and $30 million grants available right now on grocery stores. Just because you apply for a grant doesn't mean you get it. But I've been trying to look at the grants that we have been getting over the last few years and to try to figure out what's out there. And I'm glad we're taking a look at that. I know we've gotten over $5 million in grants for parks, I think over the last 3 years. But I don't want to make decisions in a vacuum.
No, totally understand.
Is basically what I'm saying. I don't want to close parks in neighborhoods that are being used either. I don't think anybody's talking about that, but I just don't want to make decisions in a vacuum.
And I agree. But we got to understand where most of those 63 parks are. Most of those 63 parks are located in high crime areas. And we need to keep people active there. If we do choose to sell that land, it needs to be a very cognizant decision, and that we know development is going to happen shortly thereafter. Otherwise, it could turn into things we don't want. And again, that's from a public safety standpoint. It's not wise to do that just yet without having a thorough plan in place, almost like a playbook. It's easy to say, but hard to do. Director Wright. I wanted to get in order, Director Wright.
Hey, I got my notes. I'm going to start by thanking Joan for helping advocate for the upgrades that we need. Prevention, kids love sports, and if you get them in sports, you got their attention. And that's one of the problems that we have, is getting the attention of the kids and the parents. And sports does that, and I think we all know that. And when you eliminate that component, to say you got a program over here, but you don't have any sports or anything over here that they're going to engage in, they might not go to your program, but they want to play ball in some form. So thank you for that. And I also want to thank Dr. Compuris. He did take time out of his schedule to come out and look at the ball fields, and we walked everything, and he has a clear understanding of the need and what the issues are. So I want to say thank you for that, and for engaging the business community. They are interested in partnering as well. They've always been at the table, but they felt like the city should come up with some money as well. And that's the part that I never could get. So I thank you for that. There are a couple of things I wanted to bring up regarding the food deserts, Mayor. The John Bear area is a food desert. It's a financial desert as well. I have a project that I'm working on with the Targeted Community Development Initiative for a 40-acre site on Barrow Road. And one of the projects that we want to do there is a grocery store. And I would like to be able to access some of these funds when we put that package together. I have public and private people at the table, and I've engaged with the chamber, and they're at the table and helping me, and we're bringing Baptist Health to the table. We've got all the parties on the table, and we've got things now framed so that prices are reasonable for land. And we also have a commercial developer that's willing to build, and we do have a grocery store that's willing to locate there. So I do think there will be some infrastructure needs for this project. It is a huge project, okay? It is huge. A 40-acre, one site contiguous land is a lot. But I did want to make that known so that when you put together your committee or whatever, I would like to be a part of that, since I am a food desert. Okay, I don't know if you've already made that selection or if that's even possible, but I would like to.
I haven't made any selections just yet besides Director Webb, but we will work on that and definitely hear you.
I would appreciate being involved. Regarding Pankey, I've had some people from Pankey reach out to me, Director Peck, about the conditions out there, so I can echo what you're saying, and I would like to see us try to do something out there as well. And with regards to the
Pankey Station or the community center or whatever, I would like to see us fulfill a promise that we made in 2011, that we turn that into more of a precinct, which is what we had promised the voters that we would do. And that way that would lessen the time of traveling from Northwest out there. So I don't even know if anybody wants to consider that anymore, or whether we're just going to let that project languish, or that we're done. But that still is an issue, because right now, John Barrow, half of it, if not all of it, is being patrolled by Southwest. And I'm continuing to get complaints from citizens out there, Mayor, that they don't see patrols. And when I've engaged with the Southwest Patrol at meetings, they're not familiar with that area because they've never worked that area. So I know what the chief said regarding the decision he made to make that change, but it has created a problem, and people are not very happy that they don't see patrol officers in the neighborhood out there. And that is something that might come back to bite us during this election. Because how are you going to tell me you're going to do all these things and then don't do them, and then come back and ask me to vote for it again? So those are the kind of dilemmas that we face. And I get this question all the time: why is Northwest not policing the Barrow area?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So I think that is, and regarding the parks, we may not be able to make a decision to close parks, because I do understand you just can't close something without having a plan. But I also want you to know that a lot of these parks, people are not going in them because they're not safe. So keeping them open and not being safe for the citizens to use is a dilemma as well. And one of the solution may be for us to have programming going on in these parks. And I don't think we have, I can speak for the ones going on in my area. There are no programs in the parks. So that might be a solution that we might want to consider, that once we get staffing in place, that there be some type of programming going on in these parks. Because right now, they're just basically, there's some kind of phrase that you use for when something is just not used, it's just there. You cut it and it's open and you can go in if you want to, but nothing else goes on. So that's something we might want to consider when we're making these decisions, as well as our Parks Commission might want to undertake a study to see what we could do with some of the parks that are underutilized, or try to reduce the number. But we do have a Parks Commission, and I don't think their recommendations or input gets considered.
Yes, ma'am. We'll, at the appropriate time, we'll have the Parks Commission, I believe they have a Parks Master Plan as well that they can present on updates there. Director Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor. Two things, and I'll try to be brief. Earlier, we talked a little bit, and it's for Director Cox, we talked a little bit about equity and splitting up the bond money among the wards. When we first got notice of the money from the ARPA funds, I spent some time reading through the initial recommendations, and I thought I remembered that there was something about census tracts and income levels. Is that still applicable to how we spend this money? Are there certain parts of town that end up going to get more attention because of the ARPA regulations require us to do so?
Yes, that's entirely possible. With the final rule that became effective in April, they made it, they kind of went away from you have to go with the exact census tract, and they broadened the definition of a disproportionately impacted community because they realized that was a little bit too narrow. So that is definitely a guiding principle. So sometimes if there's a program or a recommendation that really needs to be focused in a disproportionately impacted community, we note that for you.
And not to put you on the spot, maybe you can send us something, but have we designated what constitutes disproportionately impacted areas within our city?
So just generally speaking, we know that wards 1, 2, 6, and 7 qualify. There are certainly other parts of the city that qualify, but that's kind of a shorthand way to think about it.
And I just want to be, and I think I get it, but I want to be clear that the money that the federal government is giving us, they're saying, hey, spend it in those areas, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I don't know if this question for Director Cox, City Manager, or the Mayor, but this is kind of a procedural question, because I'm not sure how we did it last year when we did the first tranche. But we have these categories, and we hadn't laid out the specifics. Obviously, Director Wright has a specific thing that she's concerned about. Me being a member of the A&P Commission, we had a meeting last week, talked about some things that need to be done in the river market and with the amphitheater that is the city's responsibility. How should we go about, assuming we pass something next week, but how should we go about saying, hey, I would like X to be done with Y amount of dollars?
So
within these categories.
Very similar to what we did, again, when this board approved the first $18 million and exactly where all those dollars went. There were some programs due to, and there have been many things that have changed from the first iteration of the ARPA funds to the second iteration where we were able to leverage dollars from the government, basically, Emily, if you'll share with the government loss, I believe is what it's called, if you share.
Oh, yes, lost revenue for governmental services.
So there were we gave certain allocations. This board approved those allocations. Most of those were related to infrastructure, community violence, of course, some broadband, things of that nature, all $18 million allocation. There were certain things that we knew specifically because of the government loss ratio that we already had bids approved. So for Ward 7 and Swaggerty, Lord, my memory, but the infrastructure work that we're doing in Swaggerty branch, that was already a part of the 3/8 cent sales tax. We already had it at the bid, but we were able to go straight to bid, spend that money from ARPA, and then freed up to do some other projects from 3/8 cent sales tax. So that was something specific, but we were able to do that because it was already gone through the bidding process. Everything else was an allocation. And then as we went through the procurement procedures, understanding that we had to do some bid designs, things of that nature, that then came back before you. For instance, we had allocation for parks. Southside Park, this is part of the first tranche of funding that we spent. And it has to go through iteration and processes to come back before the board. The board touches every piece from the allocation to the specific funding each time of the $18 million that's already been funded. And so to get into your answer, once this allocation goes through, staff will then assess. Please share different things, just like Director Wright has shared in ad nauseum, and we hear her as it relates to things with ballparks. We'll go to this community center fund. We'll do a needs assessment on all the community centers based on what that cost, and see what we can do within that amount for each community center, which includes West Central Community Center. We understand that West Central's needs may not be a building. It will be ball fields. Dunbar may have some other needs. Southwest may have other needs. And then based on that, once the staff goes through their expertise and then also understand what needs to go from a procurement process, a design process, then we'll come back to the board for another final approval to then go to construction. So this is coming back before you again, before anything gets done, just as it was on the first 18 million. So for board members who have specific things, please share that with the Office of Executive Administration. We'll work with staff to get that done based on funds available, based on design, based on bids and things of that nature.
That's what I need to know. Thank you, Mayor. I will follow up.
All right. Director Wyrick.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the things I was thinking about has already been discussed. I know Director Wright brought up the police substation in Northwest. I suggested that on the millage extension, and it didn't go anywhere. And I know in your tax proposal, Mayor, you were talking about a fire station. And depending on who you talk to, there's a possibility that there may need to be 2 fire stations in the western part of the city. What I'm wondering is, can you do substations? Can you do fire stations with this ARPA money? That's one question. The other thing that I'm wondering about is the fire department's just gone through an accreditation process, and it sounded like we did okay, but I'm wondering if there are things that came from that accreditation that we might need to address with ARPA funds. I don't know if we'll know what the real answer is until much later in the year, August, but maybe some preliminary data might indicate that we might need to use some ARPA funds for the fire department.
So answer those questions. One, yes, we can use these funds for the fire department. We have used these funds for the fire department to purchase apparatus in the first tranche. We're waiting due to supply and demand, waiting on certain parts and things to be assembled. So that's number one. Number two, can it be used to purchase a facility or build a facility? Yes. However, as Mr. Moore, Director Linehan, and as even no Vice Mayor is not here, we just can't. This is one-time funding. If you're going to build another building, you have to have operational dollars to assign with that, which we do not have at this time. So that would not be advised. So that's to answer that question. And your final question, as it relates to the accreditation, we have received, it's actually better than okay. We've received.
I didn't want to go too far because I didn't know the specifics.
Yeah, preliminarily, we have already received a preliminary recommendation to be reaccredited. So that is great news. It still has to become the team that came down. I know you had dinner with some of the accreditation members, and I, of course, met with many of them. They gave us an early notice on this past Thursday of very, very, very good remarks and to receive reaccreditation. And of course, it has to go through the official process, but they've shared with us. And again, what you'll hear at the next update, I think Chief Hubbard may not be able to attend next week, Director Peck, but we will have an update sent to you just through some schedules on. He's already sent a note to me. He will share the update on apparatus. But again, I want to just reiterate to board members, we are at the behest of supply and demand right now in the open market as it relates to those very expensive parts from the fire apparatus. But we do have the funding. It is being worked on. Chief Hubbard will give an update. We'll get that either emailed to you, Director Peck, or we'll see before Chief Hubbard has his scheduling conflict that he'll sit down with you. Is that permissible for you?
Yes, thank you.
All right, so we'll, Mr. Moore, we'll make sure instead of having a presentation, we'll get something emailed out to the board, and also Chief Hubbard will meet with Director Peck. Director Warwick, did I answer all your questions?
Yes, you did.
Yes, ma'am. Director Adcock?
Yes, before we leave, would Mr. Moore or the mayor talk about the 2 meetings this week on looking at the bonds and inviting the neighborhood people to attend them?
Yes, ma'am. Well, do you want to, Mr. Moore, you want to do that now? I want to wait till we get through with all these questions.
Sure.
Director Campiris?
Just a quick extension on what Virgil asked. Virgil, since we started on the interstate, there's been a small group, including the mayor, that has met with the highway department. Chris East has gone over the plans with them on boring things like turn radius so that cars can't go through too fast in there. Studio Maine is probably, to me, the best kept secret in Little Rock. And they are sponsoring a contest right now for ideas on what to do on that park. And they put it out, when's it due, Mayor? Pretty soon, isn't it?
Yes, sir. I agree with you.
And my thought is, if we're gonna have a presentation, we ought to wait till get their ideas, because this is a 2 or 3 year thing, but for once, we're ahead of the curve in planning. So the little mundane things, Leland spent a long, long time with them doing grading levels of degrees so that the water drains such and such a way. There's some real stipulations on what we can do and can't do at that park, as far as, because it'll be solely owned by the state or the highway department. But there is a small cadre that Gabe is the head of that is looking into this all the time, and I can brief you more on it. But for once, we're ahead of the game doing something, trying to make something work. What's that?
You said wait for Studio Maine to make their presentations, or?
Studio Maine, have you ever worked with Studio Maine?
Yes.
They are the young, aggressive, fun architects in town who spend their nights and weekends trying to make Little Rock better. And you give them a project and they don't take away from their parent fund, but they will bring ideas on what to do with big things. And they've taken, just because they want to make Little Rock better. So we may not have the walk money to have somebody from New York to come in and do it, but we've got people here who want to make Little Rock better. And I applaud them every day for what they do. And, you know, the old person in the group is Joe Stanley, who's still around helping. But they're the ones that have worked on all these things with some other people. They're the ones who are trying to put things forward. They're the ones who brings you pictures. If you look at the interstate right now, what they're doing right now and compared to now, the walls, the present interstate are like this, and so the sound goes out and it makes it loud. Now the walls are vertical, and the road is about 20 feet taller than it is before. So they found places in Orlando and places like that where you can light those areas and put entertainment venues underneath on a permanent basis to use now and going forward. And there are just a whole slew of ideas of what to do to make it great down there. And they're working on all those things, and I'm proud of them, what they do.
All right. Director Richardson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I just want to dovetail on the point that Director Phillips made about us having specific criteria where we could spend some monies and some funds, especially from the federal government. I debated your predecessor on this fact a lot during his tenure there. Take us back to 2008 after the recession when we had the NSP 1 and 2 funding. For the most part, that funding, those new homes and homes redevelopment had to happen based on the criteria in wards 1 and 2. So there are some criteria that we're bound by that we don't have the flexibility to move away from based on the federal guidelines that give us the funding. So I want to echo that point that Director Phillips made. And secondly, I'm somewhat uncomfortable hearing someone say they won't vote for this because they won't get their own specific item. That makes me feel a bit nervous and uncomfortable. And I'm also uncomfortable with the catchphrases that we use, like wraparound services, now seems to be food deserts and financial deserts. And I would challenge or encourage my colleagues to research what a food desert is, to make sure we know what it is that we're advocating for, and to make sure we know what we're claiming we're part of and have and don't have. Because I can live across the street from an operating, functioning grocery store and still be in a food desert based on a definition of food desert. So I would challenge and encourage my colleagues to research food desert and get the definition of what a food desert is. And then we certainly know what financial deserts are. We have those throughout many parts of underserved parts of our city. And Mayor, I just want to get back to the violence part as well. When we went back to our notoriety banging in the rock days, unfortunately, a lot of the young people who were committing these acts of violence They were kicked out of school. They were banned from community centers. They were banned from Boys and Girls Club. They were banned from organized sports programs. And the only way we were able to get them engaged and back into those facilities was get them to be a part of a program, some organized program by an outside entity. So I think I'm not dismissive of anybody saying that young people not having an opportunity to participate in activities won't lead them to criminal activities. But I will say that a lot of them have been banned, and a lot of them cannot come to some of these programs and facilities that we're talking about. And I think we need to, in my estimation, in our best interest, we should figure out ways to organize programming to get them reconnected, get them connected to some of these facilities that we're talking about, get them connected to some of the programs that we're talking about, in order to address the violence that we're seeing in our community. What I'm seeing in terms of my opinion, and guys, please allow me to right or wrong, in my opinion, is I'm seeing us, in one respect, lay a framework, a foundation for a long-term solution to violence, but I think there are some immediate concerns, immediate issues, immediate things that we're getting funding for right now. And some immediate things we need to be looking at trying to address to engage this population right now that's committing these acts that are not a part of any of these organized entities that we're talking about. And I just think it would be in our best interest if we take that approach and proactively look at it from that standpoint and look at it from a point of engagement or re-engagement or getting them back connected. And just dovetail and circle back around to Director Phillips' point, we are limited by federal guidelines of some of the funding guides that we can spend and where we can spend it. Mayor Stoller and I talked about that a lot. And many of you guys have been up there long enough to remember NSP 1 and NSP 2 funding that dealt with housing. For the most part, it had to be spent south of 630. And if you want to break it down even further, most of it had to be spent in wards 1 and 2, the inner part, the older parts of our city. Not that we didn't want to spend in other parts, but it had to be. If we were going to get those funds, we had to utilize those funding based on the criteria that we access that funding through. So I think we need to make sure we keep that in mind. And it's been an interesting conversation, Mayor, and that's all I have to say on that.
Thank you so much. Director Adcock, is your hand still up? No. All right. Director Wright, is your hand still up?
No, but I will make a comment on the food desert. Director Webb, can you clarify for me? I thought the federal government determined that for certain areas, So that's not something that we determine, that's something that's determined for us. Okay, that's what I thought.
And there's a definition, and then there's also a definition of a food swamp, and we could be into a whole other.
And I didn't even know I was a food desert until I was informed by staff. So thank you for that. Okay.
Director Richardson, is your hand up?
No, sir. I'm sorry. I didn't take it down, but I think Director Webb gave the answer I would have given. Even though I wouldn't ask the question, but I'll take it down now. But I think Director Webb gave us a correct answer.
Thank you so much. I believe we've answered all of the questions. Director Cox, I think I'm glad we were able to get many of the board members' concerned addressed in this proposal. We'll take additional feedback to bring back before the board for a vote. Here next Tuesday. Again, board members, these are solely allocations. That is the first vote. Then as things get work with staff, goes through procurement, looking at different design and bids from various projects, that'll come back to you before anything is executed and or constructed. So we'll bring this back before the board again next Tuesday. In the meantime, in hopes that you do pass this next Tuesday, as shared with Director Phillips and Director Wright, if there are specific things within these allocations, please share that with us, and we'll work with staff to see what's available based on the needs and assessments of what you've shared and what staff is sharing as well. from those needs and assessments, and of course, the community. So just want to go through that particular process. Mr. Moore, if you'll share with us the community public hearings.
Sure. Angie, can you pull up our website and with the dates on the, starting this Thursday, we will have our first meeting this week at the, regarding the millage proposal. All the meetings will start at 6 o'clock. The first one is at Dunbar Community Center on June the 2nd. And then that's the only one for this week. And then next week, we'll have 3. We'll be at the Southwest Community Center on Monday, on Wednesday, Northwest Police Station, on Thursday, Pankey Community Center. And then those are the 3 for next week. And then the last 2 will be Wednesday, June 15th at Trinity Presbyterian and West Central on June 16th. We encourage everyone to attend any of the meetings that they may be able to attend to give us input and thoughts on the various 6 ballot issues. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no other questions, this meeting is adjourned.